so thanks for joining us. Corent is here. Thanks for joining, Corent. Yes, I'm going to start by welcoming everybody for joining us this afternoon. This is the fourth in our series of restoration quests. Right now, we have Mr. Henry Reid and Mrs. Corent McDonald with us. Mr. Reid is the principal consultant at Reid Consulting, and that is a boutique design, a custom design. They custom design your interventions. He has over 35 years of experience in the field of HR management. He has served for over 20 years at the senior leadership levels and has led Caribbean-wide organizations in the areas of human resources strategy, formulation and implementation, org development, compensation management, integration in mergers and acquisitions, leadership development, change management, and employee engagement and industrial relations. Mr. Reid is highly sought after as an advisor for organizations. He is a change agent who has facilitated team building and creative approaches to problem solving. He's a results-oriented and he's committed to the building of high performance organizations worldwide. Corent McDonald is a recently completed PhD organization behavior graduate, but she's currently awaiting her Viva, and I'm sure all of us will be there to support her. She has lived in the UK, where she obtained her BA in Tourism Management from the University of North London and her MBA from the University of Salford. She has worked in the areas of strategic planning and marketing consulting in both Jamaica and in the UK, and she has a passion for the well-being of organizations in Jamaica. And that is exactly why we're all here. We have a passion for the well-being of organizations in Jamaica, and so we are not going to be overcome by the current stressors in the society. We are committed to continuing our preparation for organizational continuity after this time has passed. So please join me in welcoming our speakers, Henry Reid and Corent McDonald.
Can you hear me?
Yes, we can.
Oh, good, good.
Right, so Mr. Reid, you want to kick off for us?
Okay, I can do that. All right, good afternoon, everyone.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon.
Thank you. All right, given the theme, I was asked from the original plan to talk about the role of corporate HR function in emerging international organizations, and that is within the given a Caribbean perspective. And in my 10-minute presentation, I would want to look at just simply why companies go global, options available to global expansion, and embedding the cultural identity of these companies in the global reach. It is assumed that Caribbean companies with a corporate HR function are established and large by Caribbean standards, and expanding to the international stage would fall into any of the following categories. And I will touch on two key ones first, and this is for large companies, that they own brands consumed in foreign markets and are seeking, therefore, to grow these brands beyond what a representative or a franchise can deliver, as well as to leverage their corporate brands. Two, they are compelling risk mitigation factors in their management of taxation and supply chain. But more broadly, Caribbean companies seek to go international for the following. One is to explore new markets and grow sales, to increase profit margins while also increasing their distribution, to reduce product costs by being close to raw materials, ensuring stability in supplies, delivering product offerings or diversifying their product offerings, getting access to talent not available at home, seeking competitive advantage over home-based competition, seeking to benefit from foreign investment opportunities, taking advantage of tax differences, and finally, to get around protectionist barriers. And unfortunately, this is one of the things that we have to contend with in the Caribbean. The reason behind international expansion or segments of the supply chain being impacted will determine the nature of the organization chosen for the expansion. While there's always the option to do mergers and acquisitions or set up branches, strategic partnering and outsourcing of manufacturing, logistics, sourcing, distribution, and sales sometimes satisfy corporate goals faster, cheaper, and more effectively. Regardless of the option chosen, appropriate HR due diligence should be done, even if the relationship with the outsourced partner is arm's length. By mere visibility of your brand in a production facility that breaches international or domestic laws, the brand could potentially suffer, and eventually the corporate brand and conceivably the value of the company follows. Corporate HR would best serve a company by evaluating or the evaluation of liability in employee retirement schemes, productivity schemes, labor standards, outstanding legal challenges, and allegations of legal and ethical breaches. Alternatively, though, a well-structured due diligence would also indicate areas of contrast or similarity in core values, cultural practices of the target organizations. This engagement gives HR a head start in the HR value chain and hence determine the strategy to best serve corporate goals. In the outsourcing option, both corporate and employer brands are simply silent participants in the value creation chain. It does not, however, prevent the expanding organization from enforcing its core values and ethical standards. One approach that helps to embed the values of the acquiring partner is the use of supplier codes of conduct. Corporate HR can ensure that all suppliers' contracts include this code, which should cover the following areas. And the areas are laws and ethical standards, human rights and fair labor practices, which would include child labor, forced labor. And these are very large areas of concern now in international trade. Compensation and working hours, freedom of association and collective bargaining, and diversity. Also would be health and safety, particularly if you are a provider of consumables. And a company like, say, Grace or any of these companies that sell consumer products would have serious concerns about health and safety. Data protection and disclosure of information. And that, again, this is critical because you don't want to be in a situation when an outsourced partner shares your information with a competitor, which could unseat you. Bribery and corruption, trade regulations, money laundering and financial records, fair competition, conflict of interest, environment and business continuity planning, business partner dialogue, compliance with supply code of conduct. But those are the areas that, yes, you're only an outsourced partner, but following these rules and this contract would therefore sometimes force the partner to be more compliant with international standards, and in so doing, meet your own corporate standards. In the second broad option of expansion, that is where brick and mortar becomes a choice, there will be more direct role for corporate HR, doing the usual HRM, and for you OT, HRD duties. The outsource of due diligence, the outcome of the due diligence sets the priority, which in any case starts with talent acquisition and its attendant issues and the policy guidelines. Given the economy of time, I'd like to focus on 3 areas that I think are paramount. And please be mindful, though, that most of the administrative and compensation issues that would arise in a merger or acquisition or starting a new business in a new company would have in many times be either regulatory or controlled by contracts, and so they're legal, or strategic enhancements to support employer branding, meaning that there are minimum wage and there are employee contracts or labor contracts. Any enhancement would be to fit your strategic goals and your employer branding. Corporate HR might wish to focus on the embedment of core values, corporate ethics, as well as employer branding, so as to establish expectations of the required leadership behaviors within the organization. And for the purpose of this discussion, we define values as a company's institutional standard of behavior. One of the first challenges, however, could be the ever-present talent acquisition, usually at the leadership level. The question usually debated is whether to post homegrown leaders or to recruit in the new market. The very critical embedment of organization culture, ethics, and employer brand are among the key benefits of posting head office grown leader, and hence you see my preference. The challenge of the posted leader, once he arrives, would be to navigate the sensitivities of strong national or community culture in an effort to embed his own organizational culture. But with the support of HR partners, the goal has to be to embed the value as well as to, in a well-executed manner, so that they can be accepted and lived. It is only when you live values in an organization that you impact the culture of that organization. This is almost an expected approach to doing business in the post-Enron Corporation episode. A study of 2011, and I think they had done work before that in 2004. They surveyed 365 CEOs. And what came out of that was that 80%, I think, of the companies believe that values influence important strategic areas of relationships and reputation. But some in that same study did not see the link between those and growth. So you're saying, yes, these are very important for relationships and reputation, but can't see the link to growth. But however, the study further found that once values are linked to the commitment of customers and corporate reputation, the matter of company strategy and employee retention comes to fore. And there's always that link. So it turns out that most companies which do not see the link to growth are the ones that did not measure return on values. As they call it, the ROV. Corporate HR, therefore, should develop a process for making the core values unique to its organization and for adopting and training managers in the use of these core values. Managerial implementation of the values or the work values and the manager's alignment of work values with organizational strategy should be embedded in the performance management system. By addressing the values and principles of their workplaces, international business can achieve and have often do achieve cross-cultural ethical practices, managerial alignment, and global social responsibility. And in concluding in this area, in terms of embedment of values in an organization, the three most effective methods of application that I have seen or experienced are demonstrated CEO commitment, inclusion in the performance management system, and constant reminder by way of CEO or executive communication. But critically is how it is lived or how the values are lived and demonstrated, especially by the leaders in the organization. Finally, in the context of our discussion of culture, ethical conduct, and employer branding, and given the current COVID-19 pandemic and the tentative nature of work on a daily basis, I would suggest that employers seek to ensure three things. And these are things that employees crave for in an organization. So they ensure three things so that during this storm, employees remain faithful and hopeful so that after the storm or the pandemic, employees return with energy and pride. Number one, every effort to be made to ensure that employees are made to feel safe. Safety is a critical issue, meaning that there are visible efforts to clean and sanitize their workplaces, and that the guidelines of the health authorities are followed. Also, that as far as possible, and where it can be done, employees are made to feel that the organization will do its best to offer them continued employment. I'm not ignoring the challenges. Two, that employees be made to feel that they belong even with social distancing. Team members still need to remain as part of their teams, and even if working from home, they are kept abreast of developments in their organization. This is a time when suspicion and mistrust can be fed due to the uncertainty of the environment or in the environment. More transparency is the antidote to growth of mistrust and the feeling of rejection. And finally, that employees be made to feel that they matter. In the language, we call it mattering. So, if employees are unwell or absent from work, they should be made to feel that they are missed and cared about. Equally, those at work should feel and be told or demonstrated to them that their presence matters to their team, to their departments, and to their companies. I conclude there.
All right, Mr. Henry. Yes. Thank you very much for that presentation. And I think it's that especially your points that you give in the final segment of the presentation. I think it's very important for this period because a lot of what we are facing with in terms of our staff is really the uncertainty, the psychological impact that this period have on us. And it even goes to show how important communication is to ease that uncertainty and the process so that we can go through this period with an effective workforce and to get the organization back on track.
Yeah.
Right. Currently, I see Miss Olivine is back. Right. Your mic is off.
Yes. No, I've been here the whole time listening. I have to cut in and out because, as you know, one of the problems of working from home is that you have your home things as well. I have a 95-year-old who needs attention from time to time. So that's why I had to hand over to Glenford and thank him for taking over for me. But I just need to juggle with her and with you guys. So sorry about that. It's not that I'm not interested in this. Believe me, I am. But, you know.
Yes, I know. All right. So with your guidance, is anyone here have any questions that they would like to ask or any comments?
I just have a comment. I had approached Mr. Reid with this topic because one of my things, I always want to know, when will Jamaica develop its Google? When will Jamaica develop its Microsoft? And it's not that those. When will Jamaica develop its Pepsi Cola, its Procter and Gamble, those sorts of organizations? When will Jamaican organizations move beyond our shores to become international and global organizations? When will Jamaican organizations move beyond 2 or 3 generations? I remember when we had the FinSAC thing, we lost companies that were 100 years old. But we need to begin, our companies need to begin to have that sort of long-term vision. It is Jack Ma. I think he has a 101-year-old vision for his company. We need to have that kind of thing. So that was what I'm I'm interested and I want to begin to plant the seeds of that kind of thinking among the HR persons who are around today, and among CEOs and all the people who have the power to begin to do that kind of thing for the Caribbean. Though that is the sort of thing that I'm interested in. And so the knowledge that Mr. Reid has been imparting to us this morning, that would be valuable information for us to know why people do it, when it is strategic for us to begin to partner with other organizations, to merge with them, that sort of thing. That is the sort of thinking that I was doing in inviting this conversation this morning.
Oh, thank you.
I might. Olivier?
Yeah, yes, Mr. Reid.
Okay, also, if I might make a comment on that. The companies, I think companies have that vision. For the last round of strategic pronouncement that Grace made, for instance, they had that vision. But I think it's a process, and maybe the first thing is resources. Do they have and you see they have been trying to move into the African market, the European market, the American market. So resources are one thing. But I think beyond that also is whether they are risk takers enough to want to invite and maybe lose control of their organizations.
Of the company.
Because so I know at one time NCD was trying to get on the global stock markets so that they could be traded that way. Again, they have very entrepreneurial leadership and maybe are prepared to whatever means to lend or allow international participation, and therefore are not bothered whether they own 15% of a 1 trillion company,
Exactly.
as against 100% of a 10 billion company.
Yes.
Those are some of the things. And remember that very few companies in Jamaica that are out there now are 100 years. I think
I know.
Ray Nephew would be one of such, and see what has happened in their case, that they have been taken over by a global business, and maybe through that, the brands would grow global, and therefore have that kind of reach.
But you see, one of the things I'm thinking, when this is not a discussion about organizational culture, but you realize, and Jamaican culture, but you realize that those things impact it, because as you say, can you give up control? In our society is not one where we want to give up control. And as you say, we have to see the value in owning 10% of a $1 trillion company than 100% of a $10 million company. Yeah. But we need to start thinking like
and maybe that's a surface discussion, not necessarily in depth as to what informs the behaviors of the owners of these companies.
No. Well, I think if you talk to Clement Branch and people like those, you will see that those sorts of things, we are very much, and we treat failure roughly. We don't encourage failure. And to be entrepreneurial, you have to be willing to risk failure. Do you know that Google, their philosophy is that 50% of their projects must have a 50% chance of failure, which means that they are embedding thinking big, and they're also embedding allowing yourself to fail without feeling serious consequences. And Warren Buffett, he told his people that he would be willing to protect them if they failed, but of course he's going to come down very hard on them if they did things that destroyed the reputation of the company. So by all means fail, but fail honestly, that sort of thing. So we need to move beyond that. That was my thing. So as I said, I have great ambitions for Jamaican companies to play on the global field. And of course, you think big or go home.
Yeah, go. All right.
I'm enjoying this. This is Yolanda. Good morning, everyone.
Good morning.
I'm just saying that I'm enjoying the conversation, and it's very interesting because I'm currently doing my doctoral dissertation, and I was looking at the aspect of talent management and small businesses, and initially looking in terms of the concept of talent management and third world internationalization. And interestingly, when you look on the literature for small business and internationalization, there is hardly any conversation about the HR aspect of it. which would have been my gap. What about the people? Who are the resources? Strategically, you have the resource-based view, which would suggest that it's your resources that would be able to give you competitive strategic value, sustainable competitive advantage, and that resource is in the people. So from a talent management perspective for small business, who is it that the small business is attracting? What are they doing above and beyond to ensure that they get the best persons, the right person, job fit? So even Mr. Reid speaking about persons making the decision when they're moving international to select an individual from home versus outside, what does that type of transition look like? So there really is a conversation about that aspect of things. So much conversation about small business happening in Jamaica. How much of that conversation really pinpoint to the people aspect of it and how we are growing individuals? So I mean, there's a lot of different aspects to look on in terms of why it is that we may not be able to move as we would like in terms of internationalization, but the people aspect of it is definitely a part of the conversation that we need to look at.
Can I make a comment?
Yes, you can make a comment.
Yes, Dylan. I just one thing I think we need to clarify here. Absence of an HR function. And in fact, I started my presentation saying it is assumed that Caribbean companies with a corporate HR function are established and large by Caribbean standard. Because a lot of entrepreneurs who have started business and a lot of small businesses are able to compete and have competitive advantage based on the level of talent that they have. I think the problem is that sometimes all of that is embedded in the leaders or the owners of that business. But a lot of companies struggle to take on the overhead cost of engaging HR when the company is growing. And if you look at the Dell experience, the chairman of that company, he was the chief human resource officer of that company. He did his own hiring and all of that thing so that he kept his finger on the pulse of talent acquisition as the company grew. And I think if you look also at the ATL, in the early days, as they grew, they were looking for talent and partnerships and so on, but did not have that kind of administrative function. In their wisdom, as the company grew, they now attracted professional management and handoff and allow the entrepreneurial skills they had to be maintained in work in market and marketing and those kind of stuff. So some of these companies that you see now that do not have that designation, that does not say that they're not doing their talent management, their talent acquisition as they, as they move ahead. But remember now, the leader has two roles specifically. One of them is the corporate, which is, or the strategic, let's not use the word corporate, the strategic, which is to just make the numbers, make the sales, make the profit, move the strategy. And the other role is people and people leadership. And how do you engage people to really to work the strategy? So that in any of those leadership roles, once you are managing and paying keen attention to your people, and in that, you would have their performance, the caliber of the talent, you look at their potential and all of that thing. So an astute leader can do two things, and an astute organization can do those things while they grow before they get into the specialization of human resource management. So as they grow, they will get there. But a lot of them do not now have the capacity to engage those skills or competencies in the organizations. And yes, they suffer from it sometimes.
All right. Thank you very much, Mr. Reid. It was a great presentation. I'm sure we all learned a lot, even as it relates to the discussion as well. Myself can attest to that. But we are now moving to the next segment of this gathering, this program that we have, and I think Mrs. McDonald, you're here, right? Mrs. McDonald is the next speaker. Would like for her to take over at this time.
Okay. All right, I'm here. Can you all hear me?
Yes,
Sure.
yes.
Yeah.
Good, thank you. All right, so I'm looking at organizational change from a cognitive reorientation perspective, looking at how Jamaican organizations need to, think differently about organizations. So the aim is to make the case for organizational change in the form of a cognitive reorientation of organizations, that is, advocating for the alignment of cognition and behaviors with structures, systems, and processes. In many cases, organizational change, which I will refer to as OC, has generally been interpreted as such: structures, systems, and processes. Not a new, I'm drawing now from technological change, adding technological change to this, specifically digitalization. The aim is to lay the foundation for an organization redesign. Cates and Galbraith speaks to organization redesign as a deliberate process of configuring structures, processes, reward systems, and people structures to create an effective organization capable of achieving the business strategy. So organizational change is not a new concept. I mean, it's been around for ages, for possibly centuries, whereby, we've moved from the industrial age to now what we refer to as the information age. And we're moving, but since then, the fact is that organizations have been changing and they continue to change on an ongoing basis. So it's not new. But we talk about change, quite nonchalantly in a lot of cases, as though it's a simple concept. But it is indeed a difficult concept, primarily because humans strive for stability. And anything that appears to destabilize us, we're likely to resist it. So change, just a definition of change, Jones says it's the process by which organizations move from their current or present states to some desired future state to increase their effectiveness. In the current business context, organizational change is not only about changing to keep abreast or ahead of local markets or competition. So there was a time when, like Mr. Reid, I talked about, being first, achieving first mover advantage and, competitors, and ensuring that you're ahead of your markets and you're gaining market share, etc. But now it's more about developing strategies. Organizations are finding that now they need to develop strategies for survival. It's all about survival. So the extensive reports of change is essentially being driven by the exponential features we're finding of technology. Organizations are increasingly adopting and configuring their businesses around various forms of technologies to improve and advance the way they do business. This places phenomenal pressure on them to rigorously bolster their operations based more on the needs and demands of their environment. Technology, and specifically digitization, requires that organizations embrace more perceptual and cognitive tasks. The introduction of digital technology also presents various forms of disruption to established ways of doing business, because it requires adaptation through collaboration as well as self-organization around situation awareness. Various platforms around which organizations operate require different ways of thinking and structuring. It therefore requires a complete change, perhaps of not just thinking, but of culture, of the way we do business in the organization. OC takes place in organizations that are already shaped by years of long-held assumptions and espoused values that contribute to the formal culture, or the invisible, as Shine refers to it, the invisible culture. It is more than the physical structure or the physical setting. They are established around history, artifacts, and values as are expressed by employees. And it provides many sensory experiences for these employees. So why is all this important in the discussion of organizational change? Because after all that we know about change and culture, among others, there's evidence to suggest that organizational change fails more times than we care to talk about. There are volumes of literature speak to the fact that organizational change events or initiatives fail at up to between 50 to 70% of the times. Some even put it are not as generous, and they say up to 80% with mergers and acquisitions. So what makes change so difficult, particularly at a time when organizations have so many resources at their disposal? Surely we have learned from the many management consultants strategies for transitioning between states. However, there are many reasons that have been given in the literature, as to why there are so many organizational efforts fail. Some of the reasons include what we're experiencing right now: environmental factors. So nobody could have legislated, nobody could have predicted that the COVID-19 virus would have come about. And as such, organizations a lot of them are experiencing adverse effects as a result. There are other factors that they've identified, such as incompetence of managers, the inability of managers to determine appropriate intervention strategies. Research, however, is showing as well that their people are such an important factor in this change issue. Employees and managers will tell you, oh, it's because employees resist why we're failing. Others have said managers, but just a little bit on resistance. There are lots of literature now coming about that says that resistance cannot, and I support this, cannot be the whole story. You cannot just say employees resist and leave it at that. There's more to it than that. So, we need to drill down. So in view of that, managers are, it is suggested that managers underestimate the impact that change has on employees' cognition and affect, resulting in resistance and a lack of readiness to adapt and adjust to change. So for this reason, I chose to look at, what the way that lower level employees in two Jamaican organizations cognitively appraise OC. Because although research over several years has pointed to greater appreciation of humans in organization, there still is very little focus on studying human cognition, or specifically how employees cognitively appraise their work environment, or how this contributes to their emotions and behaviors in the organization. So what is cognitive appraisal theory of emotion? It's a process of judging the personal significance of a situation or event as good or pleasant. So attempt a similar event, or why some individuals react to similar events differently and at different times. Employees may, from their own if there's no information, organizations unfortunately sometimes don't communicate. And if there's very little information going around, employers are likely to form their own interpretation. The situation will be interpreted based on their perceived implications for their well-being. Appraisal theory of emotions suggests that the personal significance may be in relation to. So, for example, they may, individuals may understand or believe that they're likely to get a promotion, or they may get a increase in their salaries. Of course, they're going to be optimistic and they're going to be happy and joyful, and there's going to be some excitement. However, if that's not the case and they believe that there are going to be job losses, which is where lots of people go anyways, so they're going to be job losses or increased workload because people are going to be laid off. They are likely to elicit, there's likely to be negative emotions such as uncertainty, fear, anxiety, and some sadness, leading no doubt to stress in some cases. There are three critical aspects of this process, in that hearing about the change event, the individual goes back and forth between the event to determine what it means, and every step of every stage of the process, and piecing information together, they may try to figure out what it means. And based on each interpretation, there are various emotions that they're likely to experience. The model is extended to include the behaviors that individuals are likely to demonstrate based on what they think it means for them. So this could be in relation to their support of the change or their lack of support for it. Studies in relation to OC may not always take into consideration how the lives of employees have been impacted by things that happen in their environment. Things that happened in their ancestors' past. So added to the way that individuals cognitively appraise OC are psychosociocultural and historical factors to be considered. OC cannot be studied in an organization without, first of all, understanding the historical landscape with its array of psychosociocultural contributions. But not wanting to go too deeply into this, but drawing on years of work, some conducted by Beckford 72 and Cowell 2004 and more recently myself, there's evidence to suggest that factors associated with poor, some of the factors that are associated with these historic psychosocial, for example, poor structure and poor design. Lack of trust, weak leadership, poor communication, poor interpersonal relationships, conflict, hostility. Such factors are synonymous with plantation ideology, which continue to fuel adverse behaviors in organizations. Research also conducted by myself found that negative behaviors inside organizations during periods of change, while exacerbated by the change, were directly in response to the nature of the organization, including its culture, its structure, and its leadership, amongst others. So while change in one of the organizations appeared to have partially followed a strategic path, change in the second organization was more of an intellectualized operation. Employees were not prepared, leadership and communication were absent, and employees were left to their own interpretation of the change. The belief is that the future of organizational change has arrived. Change has been imposed on the world and on Jamaica by COVID-19. It is having adverse effects on people, organizations, and society. Governments have asked that those who can should work from home or remotely, thus requiring that utilization of the large digital technological investments that have been made, that organizations have made in order to allow employees to, that we need to utilize this to allow employees to connect with their organization. This requires trust on the part of organizations that employees, when they do work from home, that they are going to actually deliver. The ability of employees to self-organize and self-manage. Now, already we're hearing that some employers, are suggesting that individuals need to come into work to sign and go back home because they're not trusting that they're actually, going to be doing anything. So come in, let me see you, sign up, and then you can go back home. I'm not sure of the significance of that. But there's also evidence to suggest that, the organization, having sent people home to work, when called upon to deliver, their excuses. People are not feeling well. Children are at home, obviously, and obviously they're distracting their parents. So the work cannot be delivered. The concepts that we claim, so this requires, well, as I said, trust and collaboration, the ability to self-organize and to self-manage. And these are concepts some of these concepts are actually alien to many organizational members. The time has come to put away behaviors that are, my what I'd say to some HR managers or to some organizations is that the time has come to put away behaviors that are proving not to be relevant for the way that organizations are now required to function. So organizations can no longer hide behind change, which they interpret as changes in structures, processes, and systems. They need to have a conversation and practice changing long-held beliefs and antagonistic behaviors and ways in which employees can become involved in, thinking differently and behaving differently toward their organization. Where are we now? So in conclusion, I would just like to say that, so we need to, the change, where we are now is also manifesting change by way of changing, as I said, mindsets, by understanding the importance of human cognition. Understanding change in terms of cognitive appraisal may influence and improve the health of Jamaican organizations, as well as increase organizational productivity and, by extension, productivity of the economy. That's me. Thank you.
Yes, very good presentation. I mean, it's very, very important topic as well, because one of the only things that is constant in life is actually change. And the reality is that if we don't plan to change, we'll be exchanging the plan.
Very true, very true.
Yes, but notwithstanding though, the change process can be very scary. I've been through a lot of changes in my life, and
absolutely,
I can tell you that most of them weren't as smooth or easy going as what we'd like them to be. But how can we cognitively, psychologically, what are some of the things that we can do, even as professional HR managers, to cushion the impact or the negative impact of the change process?
All right, so change really requires, and I think I heard Mr. Reid touch on that, communication and leadership. Without communication, without leadership, people are going to come up with their own ideas as to what it actually means. And you don't really want that. Mm-hmm. Because you want employees to support the change, because it's that critical. I mean, organizations spend, lots of money, they spend millions to, implement change. And particularly, when you talk about technological change, there's, they're bringing in new technology, and obviously the people are having to learn to use this technology, etc. So, but communication is critical. Employees need to understand why you're actually changing. Mm-hmm. They need to hear from day one why, the importance of change, and how they're going to be a part of the change, and how they're likely to be impacted by the change. Because the very first thing that you hear when you hear organizational change, the first place people go to is, am I going to lose my job? Mm-hmm. I have mortgages to pay. I have children to go to school, all that kind of thing. How am I going to, how is this going to work for me? So really, it might sound a little bit selfish, but at the end of the day, I'm there. And if I don't have a job, my whole life changed. Mm-hmm. So how is this likely to affect me? So if employees understand, for example, in one of the companies I studied, employees were being told from day one what to expect. They understood what the change was about. They were part of the process from day one. So they were, and having been told that you're not likely to lose your job, and being part of the process, they were not in any way uncertain or and anxious about how this is likely to affect them. So they went into the change knowing that we have our jobs, we mm-hmm. are going to be okay. So they had expectations. They were optimistic. They had expectations. The problem, though, is that communication and leadership kind of failed them a little bit along the way. So in the second phase of the change, we saw where now they were worried because the workload has increased. I'm not hearing from management why this is the case and what they're going to do about it. So people got very anxious. They got frightened, And so emotions were raging, and at the end of the day, behaviors were impacted. So people are now saying, well, listen to me, I'm tired of this. I don't want to be working. I'm working 12 hours a day. I don't want to be doing this. So I'm just going to do as much as I can to get by. I'm not going to put any effort on. So you find that people now become demotivated and disengaged, which is what you don't want. You want them to be supporting the change and to feel a part of the change, to the psychological safety process that I'm here, the organization, values me, and, we're going to be doing this thing together. So that's essentially, so HR needs to, the communication, the lines of communication must be open and remain open for questions, for opportunities to just, keep employees informed as to what's going on, and for them to feel, as I said, part of the process.
Thank you very much. Anyone else have any questions or any comments that they would like to voice?
Oh, good.
Hi everyone.
Hello.
Hi, this is Ashiba here. I've missed much of the presentation, unfortunately.
Oh,
But
dear.
I just have just some comments. I this COVID happening now, I think it's a somewhat good thing to force corporate Jamaica to move in terms of people working from home, be more flexible. You said something that I catch on, which is something that I believe that the mentality that the corporate Jamaica, they don't trust their workers, and this is one of the reasons why so many Jamaican companies have refused to look at working from home as an option, right? And now a lot of organizations they're just scrambling to get things organized so that their staff can work from home and so that the business can continue. I mean, I look at my organization now, and I mean, we were able to fairly quickly got things in place, but how I put it, like the things were there, but like the structure was there, but nobody was utilizing it. For instance, the managers, they're having Zoom meetings now. And I mean, that could have always been the case. Somebody is not able to make it to work today. They don't have to miss a management meeting, or if they're going to come in at a particular time, they don't have to miss the meeting. They could always Zoom in. So these are some of the things that I'm seeing happening now. And my hope is that corporate Jamaica will use it as a, I guess, a test, if you want to put it, to test the waters. And that going forward, when this is all over, that they will start to implement these things so that you don't have to have people come in the workplace all the time. It benefits. I think it benefits everybody. I just believe that what you need for it to work is a structure. You're not just going to say, oh, you're going to work from home, and I'm just going to say I'm working from home today. No, it's not like that. I mean, people have reports to produce. They have different things that you will need them to know that they're working on. And I think that is fine, because you need to know that your staff is working. You need to know what they're working on, what the results are. But I mean, coming is us to also decide what is it that is important to you. Is it that you need a person to work from 8:30 to 4:30, or is it that you need to see the results of whatever is it that they're working on? So if they, for instance, say that they're working from home, do you need to see a clock in every minute on the hour, or do you need to see at the end of the day, you need to see this particular thing that they have that they're working on done? I don't know if many of you know of Crossover. It's a platform where persons can work online. And I mean, one of the things that they do on that platform, for instance, is that they take pictures of you, but you don't know intermittently, but it's consistent. So you don't know when throughout the day you'll be doing it. So it's for you to ensure that you're always at your workstation as best as possible, or when you're leaving, to say to your manager that I'm leaving my station, so that there isn't a case where the video catches you and you're not at your station. But I think it's a good thing that corporate Jamaica is being forced in this direction, and I just hope that they will continue, and we will be able to use all of what is happening now going forward.
Thank you.
One of the things I want to add, that we know, is that you realize that the irony of it is that I can be sitting at my workstation and not doing anything, or I can.
And that's the thing, you see, because there are two. There's not just. Sorry, Olivia, I'm so sorry. The point is, though, Ashiba, is that there's not just the one aspect to it. It's a dual process. It's a situation where the organizations, yes, need to trust. Employees need to trust their organization, their employers as well. But also there's that other thing that's called accountability, that as a people, we're not there yet. We still struggle with being accountable for our actions, for the things that we do. So my study also found that this was such an important factor in some of these, in the two organizations, whereby individuals, you know, if they can get away with stuff, they're going to do it. So the trust on the employer side to allow people to work from home, but employees need to also be accountable. So once that relationship has been established, I'm sure we can move we can move freely and easily, smoothly into working remotely or working from wherever we want to work on the beach. Because at the end of the day, my employer knows that irrespective of where I am, when I get a job, I'm going to deliver it. If I'm not sure that you're going to deliver, then that's where the problem is. My trust, I don't have the trust that you're going to deliver because you've let me down so many times. So it's important that as employees, we take that step as well. The employers have taken the step forward to allow us to work from home when we don't have a choice in this case. But if that's what we want, we also have to prove ourselves worthy of that trust.
Right. But as we speak of trust, can we honestly say that most of these jobs are designed to allow for work at home? Because that's why a lot of managers or supervisors have to be watching staff to ensure or that there's no level of autonomy in a lot of jobs. And two, can we say that our jobs can be done at home? Because I work in a financial institution. I cannot do my job from home. A lot of what I do has to do with handling of physical checks, and whereas not a lot of companies are doing direct deposit, we're not yet a cashless economy. I cannot bring those payments home with me and handle them, right? Neither can the tellers on the front line handle cash. So I'm not saying that trust is all the time the issue. I think sometimes the design of some of our jobs will not allow for that type of thing to happen.
You're absolutely right, Rennie. Not all jobs, not all jobs allow people to work from home. But in my presentation, I made the point of those who can actually work from home. Those are the people that we're talking about. Because clearly, if your job is in dealing with the public, or as you said, handling the cash, there's no way you can leave your tied to the organization. Mm-hmm. But in situations where that is allowed and you are able to do that, we need to develop that level of trust and accountability.
Right. That's why I was saying, even so, it has to do with the design of the job, because
absolutely.
There's some aspects of my job that can be done from home. So like doing bank reconciliation and stuff like that. But that is a day-by-day process where it has to be done. So my job is designed that outputs are more immediate. So you would definitely pick up if I'm not doing my job versus if somebody else is not doing it. And not all jobs will be designed in such a time-bound way where results have to be presented on a daily basis because of the web effect that it has on other departments.
That's why we're calling for advocating for a redesign of the organization. So organizations are designed in a particular way to, for employees to work in the way they do currently. But if we're taking on the technology, as we have, a lot of organizations have done, have invested millions in technology, that we are now finding out can do a lot more than they're actually utilizing them for, then it would require that the way we think about the way we work in organization has to be different. So it has to be a complete cognitive reorientation of members, and the organization would be redesigned accordingly.
All right. Thank you very much. Thank you everyone for coming out. based on the time, we actually reached the end of this meeting. I would like to first thank the both presenters, Mr. Reid and Mrs. McDonald, and I also would like to thank Miss Thomas for orchestrating and having this meeting. Some very good presentation went forward, and we get some very good feedback as well. I mean, I can speak to other members of the group. I've learned a lot from these two presentations. So we're planning to have another one at 3 o'clock this afternoon. So
yes, we're planning
see,
at 3 o'clock. We will
yeah.
have Senator Floyd Morris. He will be
Mhm.
speaking about the new GOJ policy on disabilities in the workplace. We will have Dr. Delroy Chevers speaking about innovation in the workplace. And we will have Dr. Lloyd Parks asking if we should pay for HR education. Who should pay for HR education? Can we as a society not afford to subsidize it? So those should be very interesting. And I am thanking everybody for having come to this. And I'm inviting everybody to join us at 3 o'clock for that. So applause to everybody. These were fascinating conversations. Thank you so much, Mr. Reid. Thank you so much, Mrs. McDonald. We have learned a lot. I certainly have. And yes. I have I'm going to record these. I'm going to save this recording, and it should be available for us to study and mull over it later. All right. So thanks so much to everybody.
Thank you, Olivine.
Thank you all.
Thank you. All right.
Okay, bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.